So, Charles, I mean, let's obviously, I think your potential opponent in the general election is one of the is a very well known to many of our listeners. We can talk about Mitch McConnell in a bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your history, your experience, both in terms of having grown up in Louisville and also in terms of what you've done in the state assembly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's truly an honor. I'll listen to you. And thank you for asking, because my story, my background growing up in Kentucky is really what inspired me to stand up to this incredible challenge now. And, you know, I'm from the west end of Louisville in Kentucky, and Louisville's one of the most segregated cities in the country. And I live now in what has been the poorest zip code in the state. And, you know, it really shaped my perspective on the world and on challenges that Kentuckians face, and really inspired me to want to do something about it, because I grew up in poverty. Both my parents dropped out of high school to take care of the family, and I was on food stamps and free lunch all through school. And, you know, I knew then that it wasn't because we were deficient. It wasn't because we didn't work hard. My mom worked multiple jobs, and even when she did, I'd still come home, the lights be cut off, water be cut off, and she'd go without eating so I could eat at times. And that really showed me, you know, that there are a lot of Kentuckians that understand that story, that have worked hard and still are struggling to get by. And, you know, it led me into this focus towards public service. And what I've been able to do in my career is something that's really humbling. I've been able to work in every level of government, but it's really been focused on how do we elevate the voices of folks that are unheard and left out of the conversations for the decisions that shape their lives. And I walk into every room really telling who I am. You know, that's why I do this work. And I often share about how I'm a type 1 diabetic, and, you know, the experiences I've faced and not being able to afford my insulin, having to ration it, and nearly dying from diabetic ketoacidosis really influenced why I push on issues that will make sure that all Kentuckians have access to quality health care. And in the state legislature, been able to do just that, even in a very dysfunctional legislature that was governed by one of the most ridiculous governors in our history, Matt Bevin, which thank goodness he's gone. I was able to get legislation passed with bipartisan support. And a lot of it was because of the fact that, you know, I shared that story. We were able to pass Kevin's Law here in Kentucky that allows for emergency prescription refills. And again, it's even at the height of dysfunction, we can get things done if we see each other and hear each other and take a stand together. And that's really what this movement is about in challenging Mitch McConnell, because I'll tell you for a fact, this is not a partisan statement. Kentuckians do not like Mitch McConnell. And it is very evident how much he controls at the state level and how much progress he blocks. And while our families are suffering and dying, he's calling himself the Grim Reaper. And, you know, this is really a moment where we're saying we've had enough of it. And, you know, just seeing the teachers organize this year like never before, right, come down to the Capitol to say that we're not going to be left behind. Those miners in Harlan County that, you know, as these coal companies are shutting down, which we knew was going to be happening, even though Trump was lying and saying that he was going to bring these jobs back. We know he was selling snake oil. But there were folks that were standing on the tracks to stop these big companies from running Kentuckians over. That's the energy that we're tapping into now to say that not only are we looking to beat Mitch McConnell, but we're looking to win our future.
I mean, that is one of the things I have to say, that the profile of Kentucky is fascinating. I mean, you mentioned the teachers' strikes, which took place across the country, inspired by what happened in Kentucky, and those miners who I think it was like 2 or 3 months they were out there, blocking those trains, carrying that coal, and of course we just had the defeat of Bevin, who I think a lot of people have a different, there are differing perspectives on exactly what led to his ouster. He seemed to be a guy who would be pretty easy to vote against, I should say, even for Kentuckians. But so, all right. So with all that said, what's happening in Kentucky, do you think, that is making this change? I mean, one of the things that also strikes me is we saw people come out to save Medicaid expansion. How much do Kentuckians perceive it as Medicaid as opposed to Kentucky Connect? I mean, like, what is happening there that, and to what extent, and what, I guess, instigated that change, if there is one?
Yeah, well, you know what I'm seeing in my community and all over the Commonwealth is that Kentuckians are really ready for change, not just in talking about it. And I think what has helped a lot of folks get to this point of urgency is really just how terrible Matt Bevin was, and in a lot of respects, how folks have realized that Donald Trump was lying to them. There were some across Kentucky that took a chance on these guys who were rightfully calling out the fact that the system is broken.
Right.
But on the other side of that, what they were getting is exploited, lied to, demeaned, disrespected. And I think what you saw with Matt Bevin in particular is that Kentuckians were saying, wait a minute, we're not going to be disrespected anymore. And Mitch McConnell, like I said, is one of the most unpopular senators in the country for a reason. He was elected 2 weeks after I was born. And so for my entire life, this guy has been scrutinized. And people do not like him, but the question is that, well, he's been in so long, well, what do we do that's different? And I think what you're seeing, in, like you mentioned, the teacher strikes and folks organizing across the Commonwealth, is we're starting to realize that what we need to do differently is take a stand together. And that's what gives me hope, because Kentuckians deserve a senator that's going to fight for them and not against them and not treat us like a political poker chip that is exposable. We know Mitch McConnell doesn't care about us. He knows that. We know he knows, and he doesn't care about that either. And now it's a matter of saying, okay, we pay for this office. It belongs to the people. We're going to take it back, and we're going to build a future where poverty is not generational anymore. And I'm telling you, there is a real excitement on the ground, and it is not partisan. This is folks from all ends of the political spectrum that are saying, we need to fight back, and we deserve a better future. And I think Matt Bevin being gone is an example of that, but we got to build on that.
Right.
Because, again, my grandparents didn't graduate high school. My parents didn't, and poverty was passed down from generation to the next, and I'm trying to prevent having to pass it down to my daughters. And so this is very personal for us, and it's not something that we could ever decide to play politics on, or say, well, let's wait. Let's allow the folks with big money to finally decide to care about us. We can't play those games anymore.
You gave us a little bit of your background. You live in the poorest zip code in Kentucky, and you spoke about growing up in poverty, at one point having to ration your insulin, and your folks who left high school to take care of their family. And so you have a real sense of the struggles of the least advantaged in Kentucky, and you did mention it's one of the most segregated states. I mean, how much does that play into? I mean, how much are you as a would-be challenger to Mitch McConnell, but also in the context of your Democratic primary? How much are you counting on activating folks in Kentucky who in the past have maybe not voted because they just don't see government as a mechanism to bring them any type of material change?
Well, that's exactly right. And, Kentucky has been one of the most disenfranchised states in the country as well. And, I hear it from my own family. One, we've had a lot of laws that are very restrictive, but for folks that are even allowed to vote, the question is often, well, what's the point? And I understand that, because for a long time we've been ignored, we've been disrespected, and the folks that have been in office, and Mitch McConnell is the orchestrator of this, have created this corrupt game that is really all about them building power and wealth while we're stuck trying to figure out how we keep the lights on or put food on the table. And the opportunity, which is why I'm saying we have to build a movement, is to inspire people to believe their voice matters. And, no matter where you come from in the Commonwealth, how much money you have in your pocket, who you love, what you believe, whether you're walking or in a wheelchair, you matter. and your voice matters. And if we stand, we can do big things. And of course, we can beat Mitch McConnell. I think that's the part that excites me, and that's the energy you're seeing on the ground, because, like I said, we all know how terrible Mitch McConnell is. So just simply pointing out that he doesn't care or that he is in it for himself is not really going to be what motivates folks to take a stand and do something different, because we're so used to that. And, I think there has been a model, particularly in the Democratic Party, when challenging Mitch McConnell, in sort of running to some sort of soft center and not really taking strong positions, not really listening to Kentuckians or taking the fight directly to Mitch McConnell. And people are tired of that. But not only are we tired of it, we're dying because of it. You look at essentially every measurable index of a good quality of life, we're at the bottom. And I mentioned that I'm a type 1 diabetic. You just go down the list. We're suffering, and it's not because we don't work hard, and it's not because we deserve it, but it's because we have a senator that doesn't give a damn about us. And the fact that you have, a young black man from the poor zip code in Kentucky that is living the struggle that a lot of politicians talk about, and Mitch McConnell doesn't even acknowledge that exists, telling my story and saying that we can do something different, is really inspiring a lot of folks to believe that, we can do this and we can fight back. And what we're going to see, what I'm pushing for, is not only to, beat Mitch McConnell, but to encourage folks to run for office at the state and local level so that we can have fighters for Kentuckians all across the board. And that's the movement right there, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
It's fascinating because I think what we're seeing in Kentucky with your with your opponent in the Democratic primary is analogous to what we're seeing on a national level. Right? The real question is, can you just simply say Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump on a national level is bad? Or do you need to be able to say that and then say, here is a positive, not just in terms of optimism, but actually an active, proactive agenda. Let's talk a little bit about that. You have come out strongly for the Green New Deal. Now, the conventional wisdom is like, how could you do that in Kentucky? Because it's coal country. And the knee-jerk response to the idea that, you're going to push a Green New Deal is that, somehow that leaves coal miners behind. How do you go out and you sell that, the Green New Deal in Kentucky?
Well, you know what? I even take it a step further and say that we need a Kentucky New Deal, that we need to be leading on our future. And the reason that I push for this is not because some outside group is consulting me or that I'm trying to win political points. It's because I'm listening to Kentuckians. Now, you got to get past the political BS. And, some folks, because how things are branded now, as soon as you hear the Green New Deal, a lot of misinformation is out there. And, folks get in their political corners. But when you sit down and ask folks, do you want to turn on the faucet and see orange water coming out? Do you want to have to hold your nose when you're walking in your community because the chemical plants are putting emissions in the air that are making you sick? And if you talk to miners like I have, they have known for a while that these coal jobs were leaving. They're not surprised by this. The problem is that it's their livelihood. And as these coal companies file bankruptcy and leave them high and dry, we have our sisters and brothers that are saying, well, what am I going to do? And so the opportunity to protect our environment, but also push for justice and make sure that Kentuckians have a pathway to live gainful lives, economic opportunity in their communities, is something that we want. And, we can't let folks like Mitch McConnell define the politics and convince us that poverty is what we deserve. We've had enough of that. And so we're going to be bold, and we're going to take the fight directly to Mitch and anyone else that thinks that we should be okay with being sick and seeing our jobs disappear and having those men and women go down in those mines and come up with black lung only to have Mitch McConnell turn his back on them. We're done with that.
And I know that you are also a supporter for Medicare for All. When you say Medicare for All, are you talking about something along the lines of what Pramila Jayapal and Bernie Sanders have sponsored in the House and Senate, respectively? And if so, do you think that what took place, the sensitivity that was risen in terms of just the Medicaid expansion in Kentucky, if that in some way helps make that pitch to Kentuckians?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that because of how successful the expansion was in Kentucky, one in part because we want to be healthy. We want to live gainful lives. We want to be able to see our children grow up and to be able to retire and to be able to see our generations thrive and flourish. We want that. Every American should, and I'm sure they do, and we do too. And so we don't have to sell the idea of everyone having health care. We know how important it is. And, that's why I'm so transparent with my own lived experience, because when I say that no one should have to die because they don't have money in their pocket, I nearly died because I didn't have money in my pocket. I fell into diabetic ketoacidosis because I was rationing my insulin to make sure my girls could eat. And I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to choose my girls every day of the week. And that's the story that Kentuckians know about. And so the reality is, especially here in the Commonwealth, because so many families are suffering and struggling, we cannot be incremental in how we approach our priorities. And so when we're talking about expanding healthcare and push for Medicare for all, it is imperative that we treat it as a sense of urgency, because it is. And what we can't afford is our senator scoffing at that, insulting us and saying, well, just call me the Grim Reaper.
Right.
I was talking to a young man in McCracken County down in West Kentucky just a couple of days ago that said that, well, Charles, because you've taken a stand, I'm going to as well. And he just found out his mother's cancer has returned. I mean, this is something that we deal with all the time. And so the opportunity to be bold in the eyes of some is really us doing what we should have been doing a long time ago.
Well, I got to say, Charles, that, in prep of this interview, I went to bookerforkentucky.com, your website, and I watched your ad. And I got to say, we're out of time here, but that ad is one of the most moving ads, and I think one of the most powerful ads I've seen in this cycle. And I wish you all the luck. And I suspect that when people go and visit that website and listen to that ad and take a look at you, you're going to get support from across the country. And just with 20 seconds left, like what are you looking for people? I imagine donations and volunteers.
Yeah, we're building a movement of regular folks taking a stand. Even if you don't have a lot of money in your pocket, your voice matters. If folks can go to bookerforkentucky.com and join up with us, chip in what they can, and spread the word. We're building a movement in Kentucky, and I'm asking you to keep your eyes on this because we're going to bring some things and shake up Washington.